Hey guys, welcome back. So now we are getting back into Shang-Chi, and I say getting back, but this is a new series, which also continues after the 2020 miniseries that we covered not too long ago, where we talked about Shang-Chi fulfilling his destiny and becoming the supreme commander of the Five Weapons Society, which was the most recent and significant change that has now kicked off Shang-Chi versus the Marvel Universe. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so this initially starts off with what seems to be a standoff between Spider-Man, Shang-Chi, and his little sister, Esme. But even with it starting like this, it immediately then jumps back to a point that was earlier this same night, and with doing this, it gives us the how did we get here kind of build up. Because when we jump back to earlier that night, we see that Shang has finally gone on a date with Delilah Wang, who's the niece of Grandma Wang that we'd seen Shang meet in issue 1 of the 2020 miniseries. But with things jumping off so early in that series, he really didn't pay her much attention, and also because he thought she wouldn't be able to handle like all the craziness going on in his life. But when he got back and he then realized that she worked in superhuman law, then he was like, okay, well maybe she can handle some of this crazy stuff. And really it was from there where Shang was like, okay, I'm gonna give her a call, I'm gonna give this thing a shot. But also, while they're on their first date, Shang's newly found little sister Esme, she's blowing up his phone because she's pretty much just bored out on a stakeout. But this is another thing that just comes from the follow-up of the 2020 miniseries, because when that concluded, Shang had become the supreme commander and leader of the Five Weapons Society, stepping into the former position of his deceased father. And with Shang becoming the new supreme commander, he's also been using all of these newfound resources in order to clean up a lot of the crime and the damage that had come from his father prior to this point, which is also why they're here in New York now versus San Francisco like we'd seen before. But at this point, Shang's little sister Esme, she's blowing up his phone because Shang asked her to stake out one of the drug ring's major runners, and she's blowing Shang up because she's practically begging to stab this dude just to speed up the process. And of course he tells her no, but then she's like, well, if I stab him in the hand, he won't die. But it gets crazy to the point to where Shang has to turn off his phone so he can focus on his date with Delilah. But then the runner that Esme was supposed to be staking out and following, like suddenly his face just comes smashing against the window, which was clearly done by Esme in effectively ending Shang's date with Delilah. But as soon as Esme gets here, she's getting on Shang for not taking his new position as Supreme Commander seriously, which really isn't the case, rather than Esme just being in combat mode all the time. To where on top of that, she's also very dedicated to the Five Weapons Society, and really because it's all she's known her whole life. But as a result of all of this, she's always dialed to 11 like all the time. But while they're going back and forth, this runner, he pulls a package out of his pocket, and from that package he gets this mysterious root, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But without warning, he just explodes at Shang with like these Yeti claws. But because Shang stays ready, he just steps to the side and kicks dude in the head, and just like that the fight's over. But when he falls down, Esme finds what she believes to be a toy spider on his heel, which immediately we know it's a spider tracer. But for Esme, she's never seen Spider-Man up close, like she's only seen his videos on the internet. And immediately Shang tries to tell Esme what it is because he knows Spider-Man from the Avengers, from Spider Island. But as soon as she sees the runner move, she tells Shang like, this dude's still alive, you didn't kill him. And when Shang responds like the dude was too slow and he didn't see him as a threat or as any real danger, I just seen that, I was like, oh man, like I thought he was dangerous and fast, like my mistake. But also because he essentially attempted to assassinate the Supreme Commander of the Five Weapons Society, which is an offense that is punishable by death, Esme then gets ready to stab this dude in the neck, but then she's quickly stopped by Spider-Man. And when he gets there, like for Esme, this is her first time meeting Spider-Man in person. And when she sees him, she's like, wow, are you Spider-Man? My friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? And she goes on to let him know that she loves watching videos of him on the internet, but with meeting him here, because he stole her dagger, she goes to stab him with another one. And Spider-Man's just like, well, clearly you got plenty of those. And because of that, he just webs her up. And when this happens, Shang, he tells Esme to stand down first of all, but then he orders her to not call him Brother Hand or mention any of the Supreme Commander stuff, because for Shang, spreading the word that he's taken his father's position is just gonna raise more questions than what he cares to get into at the moment. But with catching up with Spider-Man, he introduces his sister Esme, who prefers to go by the name Deadly Dagger, and already like with just meeting Spider-Man, and aside from trying to kill him, she's telling him his web fluid feels like snot, like she's really making the first impression like right off the bat. But when Shang gives Spider-Man back his spider tracer, Spider-Man lets him know that he's tracking down a weapons ring, and Shang tells him that he's chasing down a drug ring. And with Spider-Man immediately thinking that the two are likely connected, he asks Shang if they could team up, but Shang says no because he doesn't want Spider-Man to know how close this runs to himself and his family. So to kind of brush it off, he tells Spider-Man that, it's not likely that these two things overlap, but even still, Peter's like, that's fine, I'll help you with yours, you help me with mine, and either way it turns out, it works for me. And it immediately puts Shang in this weird position of like, okay, we gotta bring Spider-Man now. But from here, they then head over to a traditional Chinese medicine shop to where the lead on this location they had got from the runner that Esme had caught earlier. And as soon as they get there, Shang tells Spider-Man, hey, thanks for the help, we'll take it from here. And Spider-Man's like, what help? Like, all I did was follow y'all here. And as soon as Spider-Man's like, he's gonna take a look around the perimeter and see what he can find, at first Shang's like, no, but then he's like, okay, I'm gonna go with you. Because once again, Shang is trying to handle this whole situation like really low key and also on his own, because of his connections and his new position, making him look real questionable right now. But of course, for Esme, she doesn't stay on the roof, she goes inside the front door. And when she does, she confronts the owner from jump. And she tells him like, listen, I know this shop is a front for a drug ring. And she introduces herself as Deadly Dagger from the Five Weapons Society. And she tells this guy that the Supreme Commander wants this place shut down. Cause once again, she only got one mode and it's all the way turned up. Always. But then it's here with the shop owner. He politely asks Esme if he could tell her how this shop had came to be, because he wants to be transparent but also assure Esme that this place isn't like a cover-up for narcotics. And when he tells her the story, he lets her know that long ago in China, he was a lowly servant for a very rich and powerful man, but everything changed when he came across the carcass of a Yuren, which he also describes to her as like a Chinese Yeti. But with finding this carcass, he showed it to his master, to where after that he used the DNA from this creature to create the Yuren root. But also because his master, who we'll talk about more in a little bit as well, he was very much into these weird experiments. And because of that, he became this guy's biggest patron, and that's when he moved to New York while using his creation as the cornerstone of his business. But he also expresses that he was heavily fascinated by this creature because it always made him think of a man who desired to be an animal. And for him, he really connected with that idea because most of his life he was a lowly servant who always desired to be something else. And with telling this story to Esme, it's here where he opens up like full transparency mode, letting her know that his master was Zhang Zhu, but also that he's known as King Wildman. But then it's here where we jump back over to Shang and Peter. And while they're searching the perimeter, they're also catching up. And with Peter asking about Shang's younger sister, it's here where he finds out that it's just recently that they've come together. But also Peter tries to make conversation and he tells Shang like how important family is to him and how he doesn't know where he would be without their example. And it kind of made me smirk because there's a ton of what ifs and alternate realities that lean into the idea of Spider-Man doing or being something different, and of which we talked about a few here and there lately. But all he really mentions is that he possibly still be wrestling, which would be an interesting story that I'd love to read. But with even getting into this conversation, Shang wants to change the topic real quick because for him the conversation of family is really complicated, and it's because of that where he changes the topic and he asks Spider-Man if he's been practicing the fighting style that they made together called the Way of the Spider, which again is a call back to Spider Island when everybody got spider powers and Peter lost his spider sense and he needed Shang's help to learn martial arts in order to compensate. And he admits to Shang like ever since he got his spider sense back, he really hadn't been practicing, but Shang lets him know like practicing will actually make his spider sense stronger. But also as they make their way in, they find like a ton of these guys with a bunch of like the Yuren root, but of course they don't know exactly what they're looking at here. But nonetheless, it looks sketchy because these guys also got a ton of guns on them. But when they make their way inside and they see this, Peter then inadvertently trips a motion sensor, which is something that his spider sense doesn't pick up. And right away these guys just unload on the both of them. And immediately Peter knows. This is what Shang was talking about when he was telling Peter like he should still be practicing the Way of the Spider and how it would benefit him by enhancing his spider senses, and he could then avoid falling into situations like this. But even still, they handled these guys pretty quickly because Spider-Man just makes this huge web and Shang, he just goes around kicking people into the web, catching them like flies. But also with doing this and having all these guys stuck in this web, Peter treats them pretty much like a focus group and he asks them like, hey, how would you describe my webbing? And you can tell like because Esme said that it feels like snot earlier, and because of that, Peter, he's kind of having a Ray J moment to where he's a bit sensitive about his product, because before he more or less shook it off with like the I don't care, but then again like here you can tell he really does, which as you should for any product you make. But at the same time, like webbing wasn't designed for comfort. But then right after this, Esme sends King Wildman crashing through a wall, and with doing so she fills them in on how this root is turning people into monsters. But then also right away King Wildman's like, wait, you're the new Supreme Commander. And Shang, he reluctantly confirms, which then throws Spider-Man because he's like, wait, Commander of what? And when he tries to help King Wildman up, he puts a urine root on Spider-Man's face, and right away Spider-Man transforms into a Hulk-sized spider hybrid of one of these creatures. And this isn't one of those things that like sticks around like for a long time, but when it happens it is quite the problem, because on top of the spider strength, he also has the strength of a Chinese Bigfoot with 6 arms, so now he can also do whatever a urine can, who are also said to be fast already, so just take that and put that on top of Spider-Man. But while they're trying to hold him off, like Esme, Esme tells Shang, like, just hold his mouth open and I'll slit his throat from the inside. And when I seen that, I was like, wait a minute, because I immediately started thinking of what Deadpool said, because somebody need to go and drop this little girl off over on Lazarus Island or something, and just let her get it all out of her system. But then it's here where Shang tells her that he has a better idea, fortunately, and he lets her know next time he shoots his web that they should catch it and use that to constrain him. And when they do this, Shang lets Esme know that the webbing feels more like chewing gum rather than snot, but she's pretty much got her mind made up on her review. But with them getting Spider-Man tied down, they're able to take the urine root off of his face, which then immediately causes him to turn back to normal. But even with him changing back, he's mad weak right now. And I mean, like, he can still speak and communicate, but like he can't exactly do whatever a spider can at the moment. And this is pretty important because when he gathers himself enough to ask them if they've called the police yet, he then hears Esme point out that these crates have the sign of the 5-Weapon Society on the side of them. And when Spider-Man hears that, he kind of puts 2 and 2 together here. But when he asks Shang to clear it up, Shang just tells him like it's trivial matters. And right away Esme goes off, because she believes that this whole time Shang has just been ashamed of his family and ashamed of her. And it really pins Shang in this awkward place because Esme's only known doing and being one thing her entire life. And because of that, she doesn't understand the complexities of balancing relationships or dealing with politics with different groups like Shang has, and he's still even trying to figure it out, because aside from him being the new Supreme Commander, he's trying to reshape an organization that has slipped into corruption over the course of centuries, while also still being like an open door Avenger. So where on top of that, he's recently gotten back on the dating scene, and not to mention his new discovered siblings who he's trying to get to know and build relationships with. And because of that, his life status is just, it's complicated. And his sister, she still has much to learn about the balancing act of being an adult. But then also for Shang, when Peter finds out that all of this stuff is connected to Shang's family and his organization, and Shang just tells Spider-Man the shortest version of it, but also he lets him know as Supreme Commander, he claims everything in this place, and he just orders Esme to call in the Warriors of the Deadly Dagger, and they roll through super quick like a moving company, like, and they just clean that place out. And they take every trace of the urine root, which is more or less King Wildman's life's work. But before Shang leaves, Peter's not exactly like 100% understanding like what's going on here, or what exactly just happened. And because of that, he asks Shang, like, if nothing else, he needs to know, like, are you still one of us? Are you still one of the good guys? And in response, Shang then asks Spider-Man, what does your spider sense tell you? And when he says this, you can tell Peter just like, come on bro, you just gonna hit me with that again? But then right after Shang leaves, we then catch up with King Wildman, who's made his way across the Chinatown area, and he's clearly upset because Shang-Chi shut down his life's work in just one night. But then on top of that, he also feels betrayed because prior to building his organization, he had spent much of his life serving under the previous Supreme Commander. So he's mildly devastated, to put it generously. But then when we see him run into a shadowy figure who makes him an offer, that then leaves us with a very interesting cliffhanger as far as who this is and what's to come. Alright, so jumping back in, we start off right after that moment between Spider-Man and Shang, where Shang had deflected the explanation once again with Spider-Man, with avoiding telling him everything that happened in Volume 1, and probably because he'd have to have that conversation again with every other hero in the Marvel Universe. So in a way, I kind of understand him not wanting to explain himself for that reason, but then I also understand that all of this is building up for a much larger conflict that's just way more entertaining. Which is pretty much how we always get the hero versus hero thing, you know, like lack of communication. So here we are. But after Shang leaves, after confiscating all the urine root, he then makes his way over to the Iron 88 casino in Macau in order to attend the auction for the Cosmic Cube. And going with him this time around, you have his brother Takeshi, who's super nervous about polishing his necklace, and we'll talk about why in just a little bit, because when he goes to this event, he wants his necklace to be like super clean, and we'll get to why. But with him just taking Takeshi with him this time around, and just as a reminder, Takeshi's also known as either Brother Saber or the Deadly Saber, like just as a reminder, because he gets called all of the above every so often. But with just the two of them going to this event, they have to leave Esme behind, with it being a casino, so obviously it's 21 and over. And for the record, she thinks that's stupid because she really did want to go. Like, if she could have went, she would have went. But like, with heading to this auction in Macau, like, for one thing, it's fancy, because like, where some people would say that Macau is like the Chinese version of Vegas, but with Macau pulling in like 3 times the revenue of Vegas and its collection of casinos, which is like close to 40 casinos, having the highest gross in the world, like collectively, and that's gross revenue for a year recently, like comparing 2020. But off of that alone, I would just describe Macau as the casino capital of the world. And because of that, as you may have guessed, it costs a lot of money to hold something here. So with the seeing the Iron 88 hold an auction for the Cosmic Cube here, this is an Omega level flex. But of course, with this attending, you also have the Hand, Hydra, the Inner Demons, MODOK with aim, and to whom, by the way, MODOK does not like high fives, so don't even try it. But with Shang and his brother making their way through the entrance of the Iron 88 casino, it's here where it's announced that the 5 Weapons Society has arrived. And with this happening, a majority of the people here, like, they had no idea that Shang had recently taken his father's spot as leader of the 5 Weapons Society. And so when Deadly Saber introduces Shang as the Deadly Hand, and when he does, like, everybody's head is turning like, oh, I know that ain't who I think it is, just going off of the pre-existing history that they have with Shang-Chi. And like, for example, like, you have this one dude from Hydra who's still upset because Shang punched him in the throat last year, and as a result he was speaking like a chipmunk, but Madame Hydra tells him to let it go because out of her respect for Shang's father, the late Shang Tzu, she only acknowledges that Shang has joined the 5 Weapons Society, which is what his father always wanted. But also, as we know from Volume 1, with the vision that Deadly Saber was given by the Grave Guardian, is that their father is counting on Shang to fulfill this destiny, so to speak, not only as the leader of the 5 Weapons Society, but for him to also rise in power and burn the world to ashes. It really is one of those things that I think back on, and it has me kind of nervous about the title Shang-Chi versus the Marvel Universe, because it has me thinking like, yeah, Volume 2 is starting off slow, but it could go ham at any minute. But also with Brother Saber asking Shang like, how's my necklace, like every 2 seconds. It's here where we also find out the reason why, because when we're met with the host for the evening, Lady Iron Fan, it's here we find out that this is also Brother Saber's ex, who gave him the necklace many years ago, and with him wearing it tonight, he made sure it was all clean and spiffy, but also he kind of wants to act like he just, threw it on, like whatever. And he even goes as far to tell Lady Iron Fan that he forgot she gave it to him. But their conversation is cut short when he has to run over and help out Shang, who turns down the champagne that he's offered, which is rude. But then when Shang tries to drink it, Takeshi then lets him know like, don't drink it, dummy. Like, just pretend, because it could be poisoned. And with them saying this, like, it isn't long before we find out that Takeshi was given some sound advice, because as soon as another guy walks up from the Inner Demons, he congratulates Shang, takes a sip, like a real sip, and the dude just drops dead like in mid-sentence. But right after this, we then get started with the auction, and I feel kind of bad just jumping to the segue right after dude's untimely departure. But with the way that it's handled, Lady Iron Fan just has people on deck, just ready to just get rid of bodies. But with this auction beginning and the starting bid going for $4 billion, and that bid quickly rising to $10 billion in a matter of seconds. But with seeing this, it's here where Shang puts in his bid, like his first bid for $20 billion. Because once again, he's just here playing off of the assumption of everyone thinking that he's just one of the villains, but really Shang has every intention here of buying the Cosmic Cube just to keep it away from everyone else. But this then becomes a problem quickly, because the bid is then raised from 20 billion to 30 billion, and Shang just doesn't have it. But the funny thing is, like, the Hand, they're not supposed to either. And for Shang, just prior to bidding $20 billion, his people did their research, so he knew what to bid so that this wouldn't happen. But as it turns out, the dude who we had saw poisoned earlier from the Inner Demons, he had got finessed out of a large sum of cash, which the Hand then used with theirs in order to make this insanely high bid. And when this happens, it throws him a curveball, so Shang, like, he has to come up with something, because time's running out, the bid's about to close, and he's got to figure out like what he's going to do next. And with Brother Saber asking him like, what are we gonna do, Shang reaches for his cuff, and right away Captain America comes barging in, almost as if he can smell the Cosmic Cube from across the globe. But just with him showing up to this auction, which is invite only, immediately the same dude from Hydra who didn't want Shang here in the first place, he then accuses Shang for telling Captain America about this auction. And just for that, Takeshi yaps this dude in the throat. And it's pretty messed up since it's the same dude that Shang had punched in the throat about a year ago, so it's possible that this could become a yearly routine. But also when this happens, Shang tells Takeshi to follow his lead as he goes after Cap, who's already snatched the Cosmic Cube at this point. And with Shang rushing Cap, he catches him off guard, takes the cube, and right away Captain America is just attacked by everyone else from the auction. But with Shang taking the Cosmic Cube is here where he does what no one else here was really expecting, because as soon as he picks up the cube, he creates an illusion that makes all the villains think that he's being chased by Captain America, to where they all then run after Cap trying to pick him off. But when everyone here follows Shang and Cap into the next room, they then find Shang over Cap's dead body. But shortly after the illusion fades, Shang disappears, and these guys then realize that they've been locked in the casino vault with a bomb of sleeping gas. But then here's where it really starts to take a turn, because it's here where we find out that Shang, he had called for Cap by using the communicator on his cufflink, because calling in Captain America, that was his backup plan, that was his contingency. But the whole thing was Shang using the cube and tricking everyone else and locking them away, like that he thought of on the fly. But then also it's here with Takeshi, he tells Shang, like he gets it as far as him trying to keep the Cosmic Cube away from everyone else, but he tells him that working with Captain America, like that's just not a good look. But Shang put this contingency in place because he wanted to make sure that the Cosmic Cube was leaving here in good hands, and because of that he hands it to Cap and they get ready to go on their way. But then Lady Iron Fan shows up and she tells both Shang and Takeshi that what they done here today is pretty much like a spit in the face. And so right away she tells them that that means that their punishment is death, and because of that she comes at them with the fans and she like mind controls them, and they're just flying around like how and wherever she tells them to, and making it difficult for them to just get close to her. And when she comes for them, she nearly gets the cube back. Like one of her fans grazed Shang on the face, but then when Cap throws Shang his shield, Shang catches it just in time to block her next hit. But then when he throws it back to Cap, who's standing directly behind Lady Iron Fan, she then ducks out of the way. But when she turns around, Shang then takes her down so she can't mind control the fans, which then just causes them to fall out of midair. But with Lady Iron Fan catching the Street Fighter KO, Captain America calls in for backup to take her and a bunch of these other villains away, and with seeing this, Takeshi then picks up the Cosmic Cube and he hands it over to Cap, which from here pretty much seems to be like your clean-cut conclusion to a crazy night where you get this huge bust taking away a number of big players from Hydra, the Inner Demons, AIM, you name it. But as it turns out, when Cap leaves, Takeshi kind of gives him one of those looks like we seen him give from Volume 1, like after he had heard about Shang's destiny, and he gives this look to Cap as he leaves. But then also right after Cap leaves, Takeshi and Shang get in this huge argument when Takeshi confronts Shang for not telling him about Captain America in the first place. And with seeing this, I don't really blame him, because Cap was really like just a backup plan. But then also for Shang, if he stops everything he does and explains himself to every single person along the way, then nothing's really gonna get done. But Takeshi doesn't see it like that, he sees it more of an issue of trust. But Shang ends that argument by just pulling the "I'm the Supreme Commander" card, to where Takeshi more or less responds like, okay, yeah, you right. But then as soon as Shang leaves, we find out here that Takeshi actually has the Cosmic Cube. And with what we had seen him hand over to Cap, he had pretty much just hit Captain America with the okie doke. And then right when we jump over to Captain America on his Quinjet, we see Lady Iron Fan ask him if he trusts Shang, and Cap's like, yeah, I trust him with my life. And as soon as he says that, Lady Iron Fan's taken away by the Cosmic Cube, and the Fugazi Cube just disappears, which has gotta be like the worst feeling after saying you trust somebody with your life. But then also after we see Lady Iron Fan get away, it's here where we then see the shadowy figure appear again, soliciting that she joins him in helping to burn the 5-weapon society to the ground. Alright, so getting into part 3, we've been talking about this build up that we've seen snowballing since issue 1, with us seeing the different heroes forming solid reasons on why not to trust Shang, with Shang stepping into his father's seat as Supreme Commander of the 5-Weapon Society. And we saw the suspicion build with Spider-Man, with him seeing Shang confiscate King Wildman's life work, which he probably could have turned over to the heroes, but with him doing this at the same time that Peter found out that Shang was also Supreme Commander, it immediately made him question his loyalty. And then after that, in the case of Captain America, who trusted that the two of them were working together to retrieve the Cosmic Cube, but with him finding out that the cube that he was given was a fake, this then put him in the position where his trust for Shang was just all kinds of messed up. But from here we then go to Muckross Lake within Killarney National Park in Ireland, And with hearing this, I'm pretty sure some of you guys just knew off the bat like where this was going. Because when we jump in here, you got this tourist couple who's being taken across the lake, and on their way, dude takes a bite of his bar and just throws it in the water. And when this happens, the tour guide who was taking them over to the Muckross house, he just goes off because this dude has just fed the legendary Mucky, who was like one of your urban myth creatures of the lake, which is one of those things that we still have going on, like for real, in 2021, with these different myths and so on still going. Like you would think with all these better cameras we got in our phones, which are also wonderful at shooting in low light, like you'd think one of these things would have been caught in 4K by now. But as it remains in real life, and I think there's over like 50 different ones like across the world that haven't been proven even to this day, and even if they out there, their page is set to private because ain't nobody seen them in real life to this day. But when this happens and Mucky surfaces, they race to get to the nearest piece of land, and the tour guide tells them that they'll be alright as long as she arrives soon. And as they approach the lakeside, this mysterious woman is out there, to whom the locals refer to as the Lake Witch, and as they approach, she plays the flute and solidifies the notes that she's playing in order to hold this creature back from eating these people. And when this happens, this dude pulls out his phone and he starts filming, and right away he uploads it to his channel, probably gave it a real clickbaity title, and I don't know if he really had time to make a thumbnail or not, but then again it might have just been like a story or something like YouTube stories. But with him getting this shaky footage of the Lake Witch saving them, he only films her, and the guide snatches his phone and he breaks it because the people in this area in the Lake Witch, they have an understanding. She protects them from the lake monster, and they keep her whereabouts a secret from the world. But it's from here where we then jump over to New York City, to where it's here that we find that Shang has built a brand new house of the Deadly Hand, to where on the surface you have like where Shang is running things differently and building his house here in the US. You can look at it on one hand like him making a decision to further separate himself from his father's legacy by him not rebuilding the house of the Deadly Hand in China, but on the other hand, no pun intended, with him building the house instead in the US, it's almost like he's doing exactly what his father had done with the other houses, which in his father's case was moving them to other countries to spy on the other countries after the war. So once again, it's like Shang has the good intention and he's trying to make a good thing out of the Five Weapon Society, but with each decision that he makes, if you only look at his actions and strip away his intentions, then it very much looks like he's doing what his father would. But then while they're here, Master Ling steps in and he calls to their attention a video that's been trending on Twitter. Although he calls it the tweet, and I believe Esme corrected him telling him his Twitter. But as it turns out, the video that the guy had posted, whether it was live or he just posted it before his phone was broken, but after putting it on his channel, the clips have made their way around the internet, and now everyone knows about the Lake Witch. And with Master Ling showing them the footage here, Shang is the only one here who doesn't know specifically who this is. But we quickly find out that this was another one of his half-sisters because Papa was a Rolling Stone. But also, with Master Ling bringing this to their attention, and all of them filling in Shang along the way, it's where we find out that aside from her being their sister, her name is Jilan, and she's originally from the House of the Deadly Staff. And years ago, Zhang Zhu had sent Takeshi to kill her for reasons we'll talk about in a little bit, and like part of it has to do with her wanting to make changes, much like what Shang is trying to do now, but that was only part of their father's reasoning for wanting her dead. But this was like his first mission as the new leader of the House of the Deadly Saber. But with him going on this mission years ago, he intentionally failed it to let her live. But since that encounter, he's kept a piece of her flute as a reminder of his failure, which in a way he still regrets to this day because it also means that he wasn't truly loyal to the previous Supreme Commander. But with hearing this, Shang is like, we're gonna go get her, we're gonna invite her back, so in a way it's like the society taking a step towards redemption. But from here, with them knowing the general area where she was at, Shang, Esme, and Takeshi then made their way to Ireland, with Takeshi bringing the broken piece of Jilan's flute, which they had Master Ling put a spell on so that the broken piece would desire to be whole and lead them back to her. But also with them making their way here to Ireland, there's a ton of locals that have made their way to the Muckross house who have seen the viral video, and they're just chanting and protesting and just going on about how the Lake Witch has got to go, which is also something that's pretty significant in the bigger picture of everything that's kind of unfolding here. But when they arrive in the general area where the piece of her flute leads them to, like not long after they touch ground, she meets them and she takes back that missing piece of her flute / staff, which was also trying to find her. But when she does this, because she sees Takeshi here, she immediately thinks that they're here to kill her. And with her flute / staff being back at 100%, she's able to use it to its full capacity, and she immediately places them into restraint. But with Esme getting her hand free and throwing a dagger slashing Jilan's hand, this breaks her focus, freeing Takeshi, who then immediately goes in for the kill, with him still wanting to prove his loyalty to the Five Weapon Society. But his saber is stopped when Wolverine jumps in, who prior to this point none of these guys were expecting to be here. But with him stopping Takeshi, like right away Logan tries to tell Jilan why he was here, because when that video got out, he was sent here by Beast, but then that's as much as he gets to say, because then right away Esme jumps in to keep him away from Takeshi, and when Logan goes for the two of them, that's where Shang jumps in. And from there, the fight between Shang and Wolverine, it just goes full throttle, because at this point, Logan has already heard the rumors about Shang taking over the Five Weapon Society, and at this point, from what he's seen so far, he's just like, okay, well I guess that's true. And it's from here where he asks Shang if he's working with the Friends of Humanity, who as we know at this point have moved their focus more so towards symbiotes, but then he also asks if he's working with Xeno, who's the group we had seen back when we were talking about X-Force, who had caught Domino when she was infiltrating their group going undercover. And then finally he asks if Shang was working with the Sapien League, who was a terrorist group that came around after the events of M-Day, who were seeking out mutants and just killing them. And initially with Logan saying this, it just sounds like he's reaching through a number of wild accusations to kind of piece together why Shang, Takeshi, and Esme are here. But when Esme tells Wolverine that him and his people, meaning the people of Krakoa, that they need to stay out of their business, and that being the business of the Five Weapon Society, this is one of those things that calls back to the way that Zhang Zhu used to run things, because he saw mutants as a threat to be a potential colonial superpower, and because of that, under his rule, he would always order the Five Weapon Society to handle mutants with extreme prejudice. But it's here where Logan tells them that it's because of his people why he is here. And it's here where he lets them know that after the Krakoans had seen that viral clip, that he was sent out here to Ireland to extend an invitation to Jilan because she's a mutant. And when Logan says this, it is news to everybody here, like nobody knew. And when I say nobody, I mean absolutely nobody. Like that means Jilan included. But also with hearing this, it's here where they also understand that this is also why Zhang Zhu had ordered for her to be killed. And with hearing this, immediately Takeshi and Esme, they then go to attack her again, because for the two of them, they were born and raised in the tradition of the Five Weapon Society, of which they have been loyal to their entire lives. So with them seeing Jilan still breathing, regardless of the fact of her being their half sister, instead all they see is a mutant, as well as an order that was given by their previous commander, which wasn't fulfilled. And because of this, when they go back after Jilan, Logan then comes back after them. Shang is caught in the middle, and he snatches Takeshi's saber as well as Esme's dagger, blocking Wolverine, stopping him with a mean parry, but then he kicks him mad hard just to separate him from Esme and Takeshi. But this kick then nearly sends Wolverine off a cliff, which is a drop that Wolverine he wouldn't have died from. So when Shang jumps in to catch him, Logan expresses much gratitude, because having a healing factor is a great thing, but having to use it, it sucks, because it doesn't negate the feeling of death or what would have killed you had you not had it, to where in some cases it may prolong it. But with Shang stopping him from falling to his extended pain, or however you want to put it in this case, this more or less shows him that Shang is really not out here for blood. But then also him saving Wolverine, it kind of takes the same effect on his sister, because when she takes off, Shang chases her down and he lets her know that he's the new Supreme Commander of the Five Weapon Society, he's her brother, and Master Ling told him that she was of a like mind and that she wanted to see the same changes that Shang is trying to make right now. And after speaking to him and talking to Wolverine a little bit more, she tells Wolverine thanks for his invitation to Krakoa, but she's made her decision and she's going to go with her family. And at this point, the protesters close in, who knew she was a mutant, which is something that Wolverine explained, with all these people being quote unquote out for mutant blood. But then it's here where he tells her to go ahead, like he'll hold them off, but he also lets her know like if she changes her mind, the offer still stands. But then back over in New York, when they get there in Jilan, she's playing her flute for like 12 hours straight. And like it's here where I also want to add, as far as like in reference to her powers and her training, but like in her case, she wasn't trained like a traditional fighter. And instead of her studying martial arts, she studied the mystical arts. And with her having the ability to turn musical notes into like solid constructs, it kind of puts her in this similar place to like Scarlet Witch, to where you had the mixture of mutant powers and magic, but in this case, instead of probability, you have a specific type of matter manipulation as well as a study of the mystic arts, to where in this case, you more or less have the Jade Witch, if that helps it make a little bit more sense. But while they're here watching her, and Takeshi once again being skeptical of her even being around, but then it's here where Master Ling steps in and he lets them know that if anything, this is truly what the Five Weapon Society is about. Because like we had seen in Volume 1, this society was founded by a group of rebels who had practiced mystical and martial arts, which at the time was illegal to the Qing dynasty, with it being viewed as a power or a threat to those who were in charge. So in a way, with Shang inviting his sister back, it's a lot like the society is heading back to its roots, which once again, it's a good intention, but also much like we had seen before, Shang is doing the same thing his dad did. And with that being the case, it once again is looking like he's walking down that path of fulfilling that dark prophecy of defeating his sister, rising in power, and burning the world to ashes. But then it's later that night when Jilan is approached by this mysterious figure who just keeps popping up on everybody like I'm putting together a team. But it's here where he pops up and he offers the same solicitation, with him wanting to destroy the 5-weapon society because he doesn't believe in fixing it and he doesn't believe in reform for the society, but instead it just needs to be burnt to the ground, which is an interesting choice of words from this guy. Alright, so when we first start off, we go into this reoccurring dream that Shang has been having, which at this point in time is for the 4th night in a row. And every time he has this dream, he sees the same thing, to where it begins with him standing in front of the original House of the Deadly Hand, which had disappeared from China years ago, and which is also why he built a new one recently in New York. But in these dreams, the original house is exactly like he remembers it, and I mean, like, aside from the sky with all the crazy colors, of course. But then also within these dreams, like every time he goes inside, he sees a woman sitting in his father's throne who calls out his name, but then just off of her silhouette and the sound of her voice, he believes it to be his sister, Shihua. And every time he has this dream, it just ends right there. But just as a reminder, Shang's sister Shihua, who at this point Shang hasn't seen since the conclusion of Volume 1, but she is still effectively Sister Hammer, who's the 5th part of the 5-weapon society, which at this point in time is only at 4. So for Shang, with him believing that he saw his sister in these dreams, which at this point has been 4 dreams, and it's here where Shang tells Master Ling lets him know that at the least all these 4s is not a good sign, with the number 4 being the number of death, and not just in China but a number of Eastern cultures. But with Shang having this dream 4 nights in a row, and there being only 4 members of the 5-weapon society, Master Ling then tells him that this is likely a sign that he needs to find his sister. But then when he does a memory spell to look into Shang's dream, or at least what he can gather from what Shang remembers, is here where he then sees that this wasn't just a weird sky, but within this dream, the original House of the Deadly Hand, it was in the negative zone. Which then begs the question, how did it get there, and what other crazy dark secrets does Shang's father have? But with him realizing that this is the negative zone that he's dealing with, it was here where he then reached out to Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. And initially when Reed picks up, you can tell that he's kind of heard something about Shang taking over the 5-weapon society, but even still Reed doesn't get into it. And when Shang tells him that he needs to get to the negative zone because he believes that his sister's there and he's having these reoccurring dreams, and initially Reed is more than willing to help. But then when Shang goes on to say, our sorcerer believes, and Reed just cuts him off right there. Because with Shang saying our sorcerer and referring to the sorcerer of his 5-weapon society, it's there where Reed lets him know that he would help Shang, but he can't actively and knowingly help the 5-weapon society, because with their history, nothing is really what it seems to be. But with them getting turned down by Reed, he then takes his other 3 siblings, Brother Saber, as well as Deadly Dagger and Deadly Staff, and they pay a visit to the Baxter building, literally disguised as tourists, in order to make their way to the portion that's open to the public, and while they're there cause a bit of a diversion, so that they then can break into Reed's lab and figure out a way to get into the negative zone. And so at this point in time with the Fantastic Four being off Earth, like on one hand that gives them the opportunity to even attempt to do this, but also with the 5-weapon society having access to the blueprints of the Baxter building, to where that in itself is impressive, because I'm pretty sure the Baxter building was rebuilt since King in Black. But nonetheless, their intel is enough to show them the route of least resistance to make their way through one of the most secure buildings in the world, but then also it allows them to know what to look for, which is definitely one of your secret society tropes as far as the 5-weapon society being able to obtain this information under the nose of Reed Richards. But even with how this is done, according to the intel that they had going in, it really only gave them seconds to pull this off without security fully locking down or sending reinforcements that were just impossible to get through. But with them making their way into the negative zone, from here they find their way to the House of the Deadly Hand by using a mystical compass, which was crafted by Master Ling, which essentially worked like a magic spell pointing to the location of Shang's memory. But with them getting there and finding the house, first of all, they get attacked by bugs, because the negative zone is full of either bug-like or serpent-like creatures that extend well beyond what we had seen with the Annihilation Wave. But initially with them being attacked here, Esme, or Deadly Dagger, she's pretty much like, okay, this is enough, we should turn around and like get out of here. And not so much out of fear as she is disgusted, but instead Shang is like, no, no, we gotta go inside because if nothing else, he needs to get in and see if his other sister is in there. But in his case, with finding his way closer to the house, he realizes that it isn't made out of like wood or stone, but instead it's more of an organic matter, which for starters was definitely not the case with the original House of the Deadly Hand. And with seeing this, he then punches his way through this wall, and as soon as he gets in, he then hears music that he remembers from his childhood, which is a song that he remembers about longing for a forgotten place. But then as they approach the woman who's playing this song, she then calls his name, and it's here where we find that this is Shang's mother, Zhang Li. And it's a pretty big deal when this happens because she was believed to have been dead. And it's kind of funny in this moment when Takeshi's like, okay, well, my brother's mother, like, how do we address her? And Esme's just like, father's other mistress? Because that's what her mother used to call them all. And Jilan is kind of like, that's inappropriate. But with Shang talking to his mother, he addresses it directly, and he tells her that this can't be possible because he knows his mother is dead. But then when she asks him like what exactly did he remember, and it's here where he tells her that he just remembers bits and pieces as far as their argument, his father's fist, and his mother letting her arrow fly. But then when she begins to tell him about what really happened, it's here where she lets him know that she wasn't killed, she was banished. And when she was banished to the negative zone, she had to use her psionic bond, which was an ability she had before she had got there. But with arriving in the negative zone, she had to use it to create a stronger connection with the different creatures there. And this is what she used to create a connection with the mantises in order for them to protect her and then later build a home for her, which in this case is a replica of the original House of the Deadly Hand. So as far as that goes, the house is still missing and we don't know where it's at. But after hearing this, Shang and the others, they then get her back out of the negative zone and back to the Baxter building. But with her coming back, she's very much out of it after being in the negative zone for so long, which within itself has its effects. But with her spending all this time communicating with her psionic bond, while also using it to try to reach out to Shang or his sister Shihua, and with her coming back now, her mind is kind of scattered a bit. But then also with them getting back to the Baxter building, they are then met by the arrival of the Fantastic Four, who had rushed back after they heard that Shang had broken in, and they are not happy. But when they get there, and Esme and Takeshi, like, this is their first time meeting the Fantastic Four. And so when Esme sees them, she's like, oh great, the Fantastic Death. And when she sees Johnny, she's like, oh, this must be Death by Fireman, which all just really just stems from the translation of the number 4 and what it means in her culture. So you can just imagine from her culture, with her seeing 4s everywhere, like to her and Takeshi, it just seems like these guys are just all about death. And with putting that into perspective, it's like both sides see each other as the bad guy. But then it's funny when Takeshi, he tries to go at Ben Grimm with his saber, which immediately just shatters on contact, and Ben just had to hit him with the rock, paper, scissors pun, cause rock always beats scissors, which was very close to being literal in this sense. But then when Ben asks Takeshi, like, did Doom send you guys? Immediately Shang then jumps in, and he's like, no, I did. And he then hits Ben in a pressure point, which immediately shuts off the use of one of his arms. But then it's here where Reed steps in, and not like literally steps in, because you know he does the head thing when his head enters the room way before his body. But then it's here where Reed goes off on Shang for breaking into his lab, using his equipment, and more or less haphazardly going back and forth from the negative zone. But Shang assures him that he wouldn't have done it if it wasn't extremely important. And it's here where Reed remembers what Shang had told him earlier, and he asks him, like, did you find your sister? But then Shang is like, nope, it was my mother, long story. But then from here, with seeing this, Reed realizes that this is a family matter, which is really his soft spot for obvious reasons. But with him seeing the condition of Shang's mother, he offers to help. But then Shang is like, no, the 5 Weapon Society will handle this on our own. And it's right from there when Esme hits him with the smoke, and her, Shang, and the others make their exit. But even with them leaving, Shang apologizes again, and he tells Reed that he felt like he had no choice, and that's the only reason he did this. And as he leaves, Reed tells Ben and the others to just let him go. But as soon as they make their exit, Reed then calls Captain America to tell him what happened. And it's from here where you can then see that another set of heroes, like they've just been added to the list of people who do not trust Shang-Chi. And with the way that this has been building so far, like they all have valid reasons. But then in the case of Shang, he does too. And like I said before, they could all just sit down and have a discussion, but this series is not called Shang-Chi Talks to the Marvel Universe, because where's the fun in that? But then it's after this when we then jump over to the new House of the Deadly Hand in New York, which is where Shang has taken his mother, Zhang Li. And initially we find out by way of Master Ling that her mind is going to need time to just recover from being psionically linked to alien creatures for a number of years, and with that being the case, they give her some time to get some rest. But after they leave her alone, she steps out on the balcony, you know, just to get some air, and it's here where she's approached by this mysterious figure figure who's been running up on every new person in every issue so far, but when he approaches Shang's mother, she recognizes him, and it's here where he gives her the invitation to join him, to where at this point he just mentions that he needs help, but as we know, he's looking to take down the Five Weapon Society. Alright, so far throughout this series, there's been this building tension, with Shang inheriting the Five Weapon Society from his father, but instead of him being the ruler that his father wanted him to be, Shang has been using the resources of the Five Weapon Society to fix much of the damage that the society has caused before, while also bringing his family back together. But with him wanting to do this without getting the heroes involved, in order to avoid suspicion, but with doing this it's only raised more suspicion, because like we've seen with Shang's efforts to clean up the Five Weapon Society and use them as a force for good, the heroes will only catch him during mid-cleanup or doing some suspicious action, as well as trying to avoid their assistance, because he didn't want to explain himself over and over again. And this is something that only got worse when Shang tried to include the heroes, because previously when Shang took the Five Weapon Society to an auction so that he could get the Cosmic Cube and take it to the Avengers, but this planet went left when Shang's brother Takeshi used the Cosmic Cube in order to create a fake Cosmic Cube to hand to Captain America, which from there put the Avengers on alert. And when Shang asked for Reed Richards' help to get his mother out of the negative zone, which at first Shang thought was his sister but turned out to be his mother, but with Shang asking Reed Richards for assistance, Reed Richards declined because he didn't want to help the leader of the Five Weapon Society. So Shang, his brother, and his two sisters broke into the Baxter building, which obviously didn't help his PR. But even though this mix-up allowed Shang to bring his mother back from the negative zone, this still stacked up on the piling case of Shang-Chi's suspicious activity. And so at this point, heading into the conclusion, we pick up at the House of the Deadly Hand in New York, where at this time Shang is being paid a visit by Red Dot and the Red Dot Collective, who recently have gotten their hands on one of Tony Stark's suits. And so if you're not familiar with Red Dot or the Red Dot Collective, don't feel bad, they're brand new. But with how this is done, we're given the idea that these guys have been around for a while, because when they come to Shang offering him the opportunity to make this purchase before anyone else, and Shang declines, telling them that, well, no, I'm not gonna buy it, but you can stick around for the proper authorities, and so that he can give the suit to its rightful owner. But of course Red Dot takes this as an offense, with him telling Shang that he only came here first out of respect for Shang's late father and the Five Weapon Society. But when this happens, it's here with the Red Dot Collective, they then whip out their cybernetic enhancements, which right away shows us how they got the name. But with Shang readily just handling these guys, he then gets caught by Red Dot, who takes off his shades, and like a classic Bond villain, he has a gun for an eye. And it's here where he catches Shang, he aims for the head, and he lets off a shot, while telling Shang as the master of Kung Fu that he's not quick enough. But then it's here we find that Shang had caught that bullet with his teeth, in a very epic yet classic Bruce Leroy fashion. But what's even crazier here is that Shang spits the bullet back out in the dude's eye, taking out his cybernetics. But from here, his brothers and sisters take Red Dot and the Red Dot Collective into the interrogation room to find out where the Red Dot Collective got the suit, while Shang takes a moment to check on his mother just after the recent attack. But then it's here where Iron Man comes crashing in, with him knowing that one of his suits is at this location, which again is not only Shang's New York headquarters, but it's the House of the Deadly Hand. So again, there's that assumption of the heroes believing that Shang is up to no good. But with Iron Man crashing in here, he nearly hits Shang's mother. And it's like, geez, Tony, with all that tech, you can't detect bystanders? But then it's from here with Shang knowing that he can't just take on Iron Man with his bare hands. So he ends up having Tony chase him to the armory, to where from there, Shang just gets his hands on a number of weapons that have been coated with adamantium in order to fight Tony off. But eventually all of this just leads to a standoff when Shang hooks onto one of Tony's gloves, which is a bit of a risky move that I imagine could have went left for Shang, but for the sake of this situation, it bought him enough time to talk to Tony and more or less tell him that he knows how this looks. And even though he can't prove to Tony that he didn't steal his suit, all he can really tell Tony right now is just to take his word on it. To where from there, he takes Tony to the interrogation room and shows him Red Dot along with the Red Dot Collective, to where from there Tony apologizes and he takes back his tech. But then it's here that we find out, after Tony leaves, that he had set this whole thing up, because as it turns out, he had given the Red Dot Collective his tech and he told them to try to sell it to Shang, just to see if Shang was going to do the right thing. But even with it turning out that Shang had did the right thing, Tony from here goes back to the other heroes and he tells them that Shang had just lied to his face, because even though this whole thing was a setup by Tony to see how Shang would react, in the bigger picture this was really the heroes trying to see if Shang would confess to not handing over the Cosmic Cube. But again, like we know, Shang doesn't know he still has it, and he's none the wiser to his brother Takeshi hitting Captain America for the okie doke. And it's from here where Tony tells the others that he's tracked the Cosmic Cube to Japan at the House of the Deadly Saber, which as we know is Takeshi's home. But at this point, the heroes, they're tired of waiting for an explanation, so now they're making preparations to make their way to Japan to secure the Cosmic Cube. But also at this point, Shang, Jilan, Esme, and Takeshi, they've already made their way out to the House of the Deadly Saber because they've been informed by the Five Weapons Society that this house will soon be under attack. But while they're here, Takeshi shows them his latest addition to his collection of swords, which is the blade of Takamikazuchi, the god of blades and thunder, which is also known as a 10-fist sword. Because again, the last time we talked about them coming here to the House of the Deadly Saber, this sword wasn't here. And we'll talk more about how it got here in just a little bit. But with Takeshi showing this sword to the others, he tells them that it was a replica forged by their father in the hopes of harnessing the power of a god. But once again, keep that in mind, we'll get back to that. Because it's at this point here where the heroes arrive, and with doing so, their entrance is not very friendly, because they know the Cosmic Cube is here. So from their perspective, they're convinced that Shang's affiliation with the Five Weapons Society has done more change to Shang than he has to the society, and for that reason, they're coming in just hostile from the jump. But right away with Cap telling Shang to hand over the cube, initially Shang is confused because he thought that they had already handed the cube over. So Shang tells Cap like, hey man, if you lost it, that's on you. But when Reed tells him that they tracked the cube here, and Tony goes on to say that they're ready to tear this place apart brick by brick to find it, and it's from there where Shang looks to Takeshi, to where then he's just like, these guys are lying, and right away this just turns into an all-out brawl. And at this point, it's not only because Shang has just been going off of Takeshi's word, but also now it's escalated to the point of Shang defending the House of the Deadly Saber. But with Takeshi being the champion of this house, he then calls for the warriors of the Deadly Saber to defend Shang, their supreme commander, and when this happens, Tony, he's like, nah, we ain't about to do this. Because when this army shows up, it's here where Tony, he just calls for Thor. And when this happens, Thor, he's pretty much the search crew, more or less. Because when he gets there, he gives Shang a word of advice, telling Shang like, hey, if an Avenger offers you a path that is non-violent, you should take it. You should accept that offer. And from there, he just goes into the destroy and search protocol, which from here then leads to Takeshi just taking off. But with leaving, he tells Esme that he's getting something that will even the odds. And in the meantime, Jilan, she tries to slow down Thor's hammer by using her mutant power to solidify sound, but this attempt was definitely not enough to stop Mjolnir. And with seeing this, Esme, she then starts to go after Thor. But before she can, Takeshi comes back with a 10-fist sword, tossing it to Shang while telling Shang that he lied about this sword not being able to channel the power of Takamikazuchi. And with Shang catching the sword and feeling the power just surge through him, he tells Thor, for the sake of everyone else here, that they keep this fight between the two of them, and if Thor wins, they can search all they want. But if Shang wins, then Thor and the others have to leave them in peace. But for Thor, with hearing this, he doesn't even take the offer seriously. And Thor more or less tells Shang like, this has gotta be a joke, right? Because how can a mere mortal face the god of thunder? But with Thor saying this, Shang lets him know that he's not the only god of thunder. And when he says this, immediately they clash weapons and Thor accepts the challenge. And very quickly, within like the first few strikes, Thor notices that this sword is parrying every attack from Mjolnir. And he don't like it. So with seeing this, Thor then starts to charge up for his next strike, more or less telling Shang that he's out of his league at this point. But then Shang tells Thor that perhaps the same is true for him, as he slashes past Thor at the speed of lightning, cutting Thor on the cheek. And with doing this, Shang, he asks Thor like, shall we continue? Like, has this settled the duel? And of course for Thor, in response to shall we continue, he's like, aye, because he's not gonna let it just end like that. But then it's here where Thor uses Mjolnir and he knocks the blade out of Shang's hand, which by all means appears to be the end of this duel. But when this happens, Shang then calls back the 10-fist sword, and when it returns to him, he then notices that there's something strangely familiar about his power. And it's here while holding the sword, he tells it to make Thor's hammer melt, to where then Mjolnir just melts like an ice cream cone on a summer day. But with Shang testing this out, he realizes right away that the 10-fist sword is actually the Cosmic Cube, which we had seen Shang use before in issue 2. But with Shang seeing this now, he's realizing that Takeshi had been lying the whole time. But with Shang seeing this, he looks at Takeshi like, man, so you did steal the Cosmic Cube? And Takeshi's just like, no, I didn't steal it, I kept it. There's a difference. But as far as Takeshi's concerned, the Cosmic Cube, it belongs to the Five Weapon Society because they set up the whole meet at the auction, their connections and their efforts got the cube, so to him it doesn't make sense that they just hand it over to the Avengers. But also, like we'd seen, there's also a factor of Takeshi wanting to impress Lady Iron Fan, with her being his ex and everything, but Shang lets him know that this is bigger than all of that. But with them saying this, Takeshi then gives Shang an ultimatum, because he agrees that this is about so much more, but to Takeshi, this is more so about Shang betraying his family, and he gives Shang the ultimatum to either choose his family or choose the Avengers. But with Takeshi doing this, Shang lets him know that he's not choosing either, but instead he's choosing the truth. Because the truth is, Takeshi stole the Cosmic Cube, no matter how you want to put it. And then on top of stealing the cube, he hid the cube, to where then he just lied to Shang about the whole thing. And with Shang choosing the truth, he demands the Warriors of the Deadly Saber to hand over their champion to Captain America. And when they hesitate, he lets them know that that's an order from their Supreme Commander. But with Shang handing over his brother, Spider-Man then reassures Shang that he did the right thing, and he tells Shang that he always knew that him and the other heroes could trust him, which is true for the most part, though like we've seen, Spider-Man had his doubts from time to time, but for the most part throughout the course of this, he's always been the voice of optimism. But at this point, with the other heroes leaving with Takeshi in their custody, it's here where Reed asks Tony, how do they know that Shang didn't just do this for the sake of covering his own tracks? And in response, Tony just tells him that they don't know. Which from here concludes Shang-Chi versus the Marvel Universe, at least for now, because we know that some of the heroes have their lingering suspicions, but also we know that Takeshi, he still hasn't forgotten the vision that he had seen of Shang's future, with Shang one day turning into an OP version of his father. And so real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below, so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.